Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to you all. My name is Shipra Narang Suri, and I'm the Chief of the Urban Practices Branch and Senior Focal Point for SDG Localization and Local Governments at UN Habitat. I'm delighted to speak to you today at the Urban Diplomacy for Sustainability Virtual Partnerships Conference. My apologies for being unable to attend the session live, but I do appreciate the opportunity to address you nonetheless. Let me first of all share my gratitude to our colleagues at Engagement Global for organizing this virtual event as part of the Urban Diplomacy Exchange Project. This presents a great opportunity to strengthen relations at the municipal level and exchange knowledge, ideas, and support opportunities. Dear partners, colleagues, and friends, I'm speaking to you today to express how the UN system in general, and UN Habitat in particular, is closely supporting urban diplomacy and the enormous efforts of cities to achieve the 2030 Agenda. Urbanization, as we know, is the dominant force of the 21st century. By 2050, 2 out of 3 people on this planet will be living in urban areas. How we plan, build, and manage these settlements will decide the trajectory of people and planet. We know that cities are the engines of economic growth, hubs of creativity and innovation, and drivers of resilience. At the same time, the way cities are planned and built also significantly impacts climate change, the other big global trend of our time. Urban areas approximately account for 2/3 of the demand for energy and produce 70% of the global carbon dioxide emissions. Cities are also places of refuge for those escaping persecution, conflict, and climate change. In the past year alone, more than 82 million people were displaced due to these factors, the majority of them moving to cities, often living in overcrowded and precarious conditions. The COVID-19 pandemic, this once-in-a-generation crisis that spiraled from a health emergency to a full-blown economic crisis over the past 2 years, has spotlighted and amplified the disparities in cities. The inadequacy of housing and lack of access to basic services emerged as the key missing pieces in pandemic containment efforts. The pandemic has exacerbated poverty and deepened existing inequalities, with 75% of the world's cities being more unequal now compared to the 2 previous decades. What was also spotlighted and amplified in these tough times, however, was the commitment and resilience of city authorities and the importance of network-based city diplomacy strategies. City diplomacy enables local authorities to accelerate their actions towards the delivery of global sustainable development agendas, like the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, the New Urban Agenda, or the Paris Agreement, and collectively advance their interests. The Secretary General of the United Nations and the entire UN system are increasingly placing local action and leadership at the center of their efforts to advance an inclusive multilateralism and localization of the global agendas. The World Assembly of Local and Regional Governments is recognized in the New Urban Agenda as the official mechanism through which local and regional governments and their associations contribute to the follow-up and review of the New Urban Agenda. The Assembly met most recently in New York on the occasion of the high-level meeting on the implementation of the New Urban Agenda. Equally significantly, the Secretary General in his paper Our Common Agenda has committed to establishing an advisory group on local and regional governments. This was a recommendation of the Global Task Force of Local and Regional Governments. Furthermore, last September, the Local 2030 Coalition was relaunched as the UN-wide initiative to mainstream SDG localization in the work of the United Nations at all levels, across its offices, agencies, funds, and programs. Looking forward to the discussion today, I would like to stress 3 points. First, city diplomacy has experienced a gradual shift from a bilateral to a multilateral approach. As of today, the total international network membership accounts for over 10,000 local and metropolitan authorities. City networks serve as essential platforms for local authorities to get support to expand their capabilities and amplify their voice. Through the networks, the collective voices of communities are heard front and center in global discussions about climate change, sustainable urbanization, migration, post-crisis recovery, etc. Second, Cities are real laboratories for SDG implementation. It is truly encouraging to see some examples in which mayors have adopted the 2030 Agenda as part of their urban strategies and development plans. Particularly relevant here is the commitment in reporting to the progress made towards the implementation of the SDGs through voluntary local reviews. The VLR's movement has expanded exponentially in the last couple of years, enabling the peer-to-peer connection between cities, but also enhancing coherence and connections across different tiers of governments. Third and finally, city diplomacy does not only concern so-called global cities. It also involves intermediary cities and is perhaps most significant for these, given that small and intermediary cities are the fastest growing type of cities. Ladies and gentlemen, UN Habitat is committed to furthering urban diplomacy by supporting cities, but also their regional and international associations in raising their voices in current global affairs. At the local level, UN Habitat provides technical assistance and supports decentralized cooperation processes in which cities are encouraged to share their knowledge with peers. At the national level, UN Habitat urges states to support the establishment and empowerment of city networks in their countries. We encourage and support national governments to remove barriers to the engagement of cities in international processes and to accessing multilateral funds. Finally, we work with national and subnational governments to further fiscal devolution in order to empower cities to strengthen their own revenue streams. At the international level, UN Habitat supports the establishment of more multilateral spaces for dialogue with cities and their engagement in UN-led and international processes with the objective of elevating the constituency's voice vis-à-vis member states and the international community. As I conclude, allow me to share one final thought. The United Nations Secretary General recognized in the Decade of Action that local governments can and must be the agents for the transformation that we need. Through these 3 days of conference, we will demonstrate and learn from the power of city cooperation to create lasting transformations. I invite you to continue your discussions at the 11th session of the World Urban Forum, to be held in Katowice in June this year, among yourselves and with the thousands of other urban actors and stakeholders who will convene to discuss how to transform our cities for a better urban future, for everyone, everywhere. Thank you.